Call to order the meeting of the Minnetonka Creek Watershed District Board of Managers. It's July 25, 2019. All managers are present except Manager Hechmati. Member of the public who wishes to speak to the board, I see no one. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell. One tiny tweak is that the Metro Mod report will be White and Olson instead of White and Miller. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have an introduction of a new staff, Mr. Langer and Mr. Beck.
Does he know that we grade the new employees on their introduction speech?
He also does not know that we haze new people.
Perfect. It's my kind of crowd.
President White, Board of Managers, I'd like to introduce Tom Langer, our new aquatic ecologist, to the board today. Tom started on July 10th and has been here for about 2 weeks, so he's in the process of onboarding, learning about the organization and a lot of the projects that we're doing. So we've really appreciated having him on already, since he's been able to give us insight on projects like the carp management on 6 Mile Creek and some other projects. So it's really already kind of giving insight and helping us figure out a few things. So I'll let him give a little bit of his background and a little bit more about him.
So, President White, Board Managers, thank you for the opportunity to come tell you a little bit about myself. I'll look forward to getting to know you guys more and more over the coming months and years. But yeah, so I come in from or with a background in aquatic ecology. Aquatic biology has been my interest in both education and work up to date so far. I have 2 educational degrees, a Bachelor's of Science from St. Thomas, a Master of Science from Central Michigan, which got me started in aquatic biology. From there, I have 4.5 years, 5 years at Wenck Associates, where I worked a lot on aquatic invasive species management, helping with plan writing. I helped build, develop, strengthen a biotic aquatic ecology sampling program at Wenck, where we focus on carp all the way through stream sampling, fish, bugs, plants, kind of the whole gamut and an array of organisms. So, as Brian's alluded to, I've been getting onboarded, hearing about a lot of the fabulous projects all across Minnetonka Creek, all the way out through 6 Mile. Some of the notable projects I'm getting plugged into right away, where my expertise is hopefully providing some valuable insights, are the 6 Mile Creek Carp Management Project. So I've been diving into reviewing what has been done, what data staff have collected to date, and then where we're going to be going from here. The Long Lake Sub-Watershed Assessment, getting plugged into, again, the carp management aspects going on in that watershed, and then some of the evolving AIS management with various organizations, entities across the state. So some of my previous backgrounds, I'm familiar with specialists in the DNR, some of the people from the county. So hopefully that's a little bit maybe more familiar for me, as at least some of the faces. But getting up to speed on the district's missions, the goals, the direction that the group wants to go from here forward. So looking forward to it all. I'll keep it short and at that, but happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I will hopefully get the opportunity to continue conversations with all of you over time.
Welcome. Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Are we at our threshold now?
Well, I've got the next one in line.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't worry, we'll just slow it.
Chris is coming over next week.
Yeah.
Come from the inside.
Anyway, welcome. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Under information items, I thank Ms. Damjančić and Ms. Johnley for an update on the Big Island Nature Park improvements. Consent agenda has approval of the minutes of June 25th, if you can believe it was a month ago we met last. Approval of the check register, the general checking account, and the surety checking account. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Manager, President White,
Yes, Mr. Welch.
at the President and the Board's discretion,
I do have a change to the minutes of the 25th, so you can pull them or leave them where they are, and I can tell you briefly what it is, however you want to handle it.
Well, my take would be, let's look at it. What is that change?
Managers, lines 102 to 105 should be removed per Lewis. That's remnant language that should not be there. The permit ends up getting approved twice, which is maybe overkill.
Okay. Then removing that from the consent agenda, if everyone approves, is there a motion? All those in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
And let's just take up the minutes right now. Is there a motion to approve the minutes with the removal of lines 102 to 105?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Loftus, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Welch. The summer tour report, Manager Rognus and Manager Olson and I were there, though I did leave early on the Friday morning. But we had, it's always a reminder for me of how many and how varied are the projects. I'm trying to find my notes here. Well, I lost it. Throughout the state, the districts have such different projects. The tour that we had was a day-long bus tour, included two really big projects, one of which was adding 1,100 acres of wetland with all the benefits that has for water quality, and it's this super magnet for birds. And they had a really rare bird there this year that should be in Texas, and it was in Minnesota, and they got birders from as far away as New York, so the word was spreading. Another big project we saw was a farm, I think they called it a Discovery Farm, where they're doing all kinds of testing of ways to handle water, drain tile. They had a well that they could raise and lower and actually hold the water on the land that came off the drain tiles and not just send it downstream, but use it later. So that was pretty cool. And they had other projects as well.
One of the interesting things about that was that they had a cornfield that had generated 60 bushels an acre that now was producing 220 bushels per acre, just because they were able to optimize the moisture content of the soil.
That was cool.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
Since we're hosting next year, I sort of tried to pay attention to the host duty also. And the first night they had us at the Yumcomp Center, the big Viking ship. And then the speaker was a historian who talked about the history of steamships on Red River. That was very, very cool. And then I saw him on television later in the week talking about some other Minnesota history. So it was overall a really, really great summer tour. I thought it was wonderful. Anything else you guys want to add? I didn't go to the speeches or the seminars on Friday morning, so I don't know if you have something else.
Because your bus didn't follow the other two buses, we were able to see.
No, I was not the lost bus. That was those guys.
Okay. What happened is, the last thing we stopped at in the afternoon or looked at, in the middle of farm fields, you see an enormous dam being built. No water anywhere. And then you see these mounds being lined up. And then eventually someday when the river does flood, instead of having Fargo-Moorhead wet, upstream they're going to divert with those dams all of the water around in a large $3 billion diversion program like they do in Winnipeg. It's 1,500 feet wide, this diversion channel, and it goes down to a depth of 28 feet in the center. And they're going to literally divert the overflow of the rivers completely around the two cities and let it head back north. And they showed the before and after shots of what it looks like. And it's amazing how they're going to keep the towns dry. So that'll be fun to see someday when it's really finished, but massive project.
Huge dikes.
The thing that was really interesting to me was that it was really all about storm water
Yeah.
stormwater diversions, all kinds of technologies that they've developed up there to cope with the fact that they have a dead flat. Lake bottom, Lake Agassiz, that was a huge lake area that covered just a massive area of Minnesota, North Dakota, and extending into Canada. And that is just, mind-blowing to think of. I am an architect, and I had a project in Fargo once, and they sent me a topography. Well, topography it's a different line for every foot. And I opened this thing up and I said, what's going on here? They didn't finish my topo. And so I called the surveyor and he said, that's the only topo line on the sheet is the one that goes down the right side of the sheet. And there is no other. So, can you imagine dealing with the drainage problems of that area? I can. So, that's it.
Thank you. President's report, besides, I'm sorry, Metro Mod, I was skipping that. Metro Mod met just last week. I have updated staff on some of the agency updates, the more technical things like MS4, permit will be out for comment, that kind of thing. With the presentation, the main presentation was on the geodata project, Mr. Moss, and they hope to have 100% of the data in place in August, and they'll start testing and reviewing, so that was an interesting update. And then they had Capital Region gave the show and tell, which was about whiskey, the program that we have. So, Bill, would you want to add anything? Mr. Brand Manager also.
We also had presentations from Bowser, the MPCA, the DNR, and the Minnesota Department of Health, Clean Water Council, and administrators. MAWA, the administrators are getting together, James. So you have an invite, I assume. Okay. But it was a very interesting evening, getting the updates for everybody. The next thing here is you.
And of course, there was a legislative update. We're going to hear the same thing probably in a few minutes, so I won't go into that. In addition to those attendances, I have been continuing to participate in the onboarding meetings for Manager Maxwell and the liaisons to the strategic communications. Manager Miller, Manager Loftus, and I attended a planning meeting recently. That is all I have to report. So we will move on to Operations and Programs Committee report. Manager Loftus.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't have anything to report this evening.
Okay, we met 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's okay. We can come back to it too.
Yeah. We didn't have a regular meeting after it, so we didn't get to report on it. But I believe we stuck to the agenda, which was mostly budget. And I believe that will come back to the CAC maybe, and then back again to committee level before it comes to the full board
Okay.
in August and September. I don't remember that there was anything
That was the only thing
specific
written on the agenda, yeah.
Yeah. To
you.
report. Apologize.
No problem. Manager Miller, Planning and Policy Committee.
We had a extensive presentation from Telly Manlayak, our communication director, on the development of the strategic communication plan. The phase one is the discovery phase, and it's into three separate elements. Are the Hamling-Horner discovery phase, which they're reviewed all the available surveys and other information about public and other other audience's reaction to water quality issues in the Watershed's mission and accomplishments. And the second element of the discovery will be an audience assessment of our various publics that we deal with, and, governments and developers, etc., and what their perception is of us and what their concerns are. And the third element is the website work that the consultant Venti is conducting, and the reports are going to come back in next month or month after.
I believe September.
Okay, to the CAC first, and then to the board. So it's really very comprehensive and very exciting.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Manager Olson, Citizens Advisory Committee?
Citizens Advisory Committee met last week on Wednesday and had a presentation from Telly Mamayak about her strategic communication plan, and it was very interesting. Instead of the usual input, lots of input and suggestions, everybody said, good plan. So we saw that same thing tonight, and that was in our committee meeting, and that was well done. We had the same experience with Becky Christopher putting on her responsive model plan. They've seen that 3 times now with her, and they have made suggestions along the way. This time they stamped it with their seal of approval. So a lot of good input, and it was well attended. So we thank them.
Thank you. The upcoming meeting and event schedule is as shown in the agenda, and I note that Manager Loftus is assigned to the August 14th CAC, otherwise as printed. Then we'll move to item 9, which is the legislative briefing, and we call on Joel Carlson and Emily James.
I won't sit in front of the computer.
Welcome.
Good evening, Madam President and managers. I think for at least a couple, my first appearance in front of you, and for the uninitiated, I was born and raised in the Red River Valley and in Moorhead, and represented Moorhead in the legislature, and I still represent the Buffalo Red River Watershed, so I appreciate the tour that you're on. I have a plan when that diversion is complete. The founding papers for the dividing line between Minnesota and North Dakota is the center line of the Red River. And it's my feeling that when that diversion goes, we get Fargo, and then we'll never lose a congressional seat.
It's a land grab.
We'd be happy to pay him, but
That is devious and wonderful.
so anyway, it's a pleasure to be in front of you again. And James has asked us to give you just a brief, little overview of the legislative session and its major themes, things that the Watershed District was actively working on, and some opportunities and things that are coming up in the future. And I think Maud is going to give you a little overview on just some of the Watershed-specific legislation that we all monitored, but they've played an active role in. I'm glad she's here. I think this is the first time that we've done this with the director of Maud, and so I appreciate you being here very much. So 2019 I would describe as a meat and potatoes session. They had a job to do, and they had to do it with a new House majority. That meant all new staff, all new committee chairs, and a skinny Republican majority in the Senate. And we are in Minnesota the only, I'm going to talk about this a little bit at the end, but we're the only legislature in the country with a divided House and Senate. Every other state in the union has single party control of their legislature. And my own observations, and it used to be very common to have over Republicans running one body and Democrats the other. I think people are really tired of gridlock, and as you've seen states move in all one direction or the other, I think that you maybe don't like the government you're going to get when you have one party control, but they're going to get a job done. And that's what has happened, I think, in many, many states where they just have gotten fed up with gridlock and they've just picked a course and they're going to get the government that they're going to get, and they don't have endless special sessions and government shutdowns. And you think of the things that we've been through in Minnesota, less prevalent across the country. So we had a divided legislature. We also had a new governor and a new administration. The governor had about 40 days to put his budget together after being sworn in, and it's about a $48 billion undertaking. And that was the major task of the session. And when I say it was meat and potatoes, it's really, they got a budget done. They got it done mostly on time. But there were no radical policy shifts, no major reforms, no real sea changes on spending, where all of a sudden we're going to go crazy on spending on human services or education. It was really kind of a basic get the job done and go home kind of session. I think a turning point in the session, both in the tone and the final product, was on May 1st when the governor and the legislative leaders of both parties and the transportation committee chairs of both parties announced a resolution and a path forward on the MNLARS system. And it was the first time in at least 5 years that we've been tracking this rollout of the MNLARS system that the finger pointing ended. They, I mean, they were all complimentary at a press conference, which you really never see, and complimentary of each other. They didn't look backwards. They said, what we have right now got us to this point, but we're going to put that on the shelf and we're going to get a new system moving forward. And that ability to come to that resolution after really 5 years of hammer and tongs between the parties on that, really, I think, set a tone for the legislative leaders to work together to get the budget done. And so those final 3 weeks were a lot of meetings among the leaders, and there's been some criticism of that, but I have to tell you, nothing different from what we've experienced in the past, even though the media reported it as some secret star chamber that was writing the legislation. I spent hours in conference committees, going over bills and proposals. They did have to negotiate to get to final budget targets and to get to some of these things resolved. That the resolution was mostly that we're going to leave it on the cutting room floor. We're not going to address insulin. We're not going to address just a number of issues that they were just going to kick the can down the road on. And that's what leadership did. Okay, we'll give up on this agenda item. We'll give up on this. And I think that's what those meetings were really more about. On issues related to the district itself, in addition to just monitoring everything that goes on within the environment committees and issues that we care about, we spent a lot of time in the climate change committee. We had a legislator who was very interested not only in climate change, which is a worthy and needed focus, but had a little more focus on our district and its design and its her opinions about how we address climate change. And so we spent a lot of time talking individually with legislators about high water levels throughout the creek and the hydrology and what we've experienced in the last 6 years with high water. And that also gave us an opportunity, a bit of a missed opportunity, but we were invited to participate in the Senate Environment Committee to talk to them about what we have been doing on flooding and flood control. We were there and our expertise was ready to roll. And unfortunately, the committee got bogged down on another issue and didn't get to us and the National Weather Service and others. But I think at the end of the session, I don't think anyone was really pointing fingers at the district, that that we were doing anything wrong with our management of the water resources that you've been charged with from the legislature to be responsible for. And so I thought on that front, we managed that issue as best as we can. And quite frankly, it's hard to do, but even when the district had to push back on legislators saying what you're saying isn't really accurate, I think we did it in a respectful and polite way. And I don't think that at the end of the day, I don't think that we came out any worse for everything we did during the session on that issue. Looking forward, just briefly, the legislature itself isn't going to come back into session until February 11th of 2020. They will address bonding and capital projects in 2020. They didn't get it done, although they had a leadership agreement to do about a $500 million bill. There weren't enough votes in the House to get that done. So that will be an issue that will come up in 2020, and I think successful. People are talking about maybe $1.5 billion bonding bill, maybe the largest one that we've seen in Minnesota. So that will be a big agenda item in 2020. But there's also the legislature that's the last point I'll bring up. The legislature let the Legislative Water Commission and the Legislative Data Practices Commission expire. They did not renew them, even though there's legislative interest in both of those issues. They have kind of reformalized those two groups under the Legislative Coordinating Commission. And on the water side, they have been meeting, and their first meeting, they spent way too much time on one issue and didn't get to their real legislative issues, but they're going to meet again on August 20th, and they have 6 potential areas that they want to focus on to develop a legislative agenda for 2020. And they had hoped in their July meeting to narrow those 6 issues down to 2. They didn't get that far. So when they come back on August 20th, that's their goal, to try and get down. Are we going to focus on water planning and water resources or surface water? They have 6 subject areas they want to look at, and that's something that we're going to monitor closely to see if there's opportunities there or things to defense against as they develop that agenda. The last opportunity item that I guess I want to just briefly put on the table for you, and reading the strategic plan and talk about your capital projects. I had a really good experience this summer with LCCMR, the Legislative Commission, Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, and they spend between 60 and 70 million annually. It's a long funding cycle, so you want to be, thinking about projects that would be ready to be funded now in what would be 2022, right? Because the 2020 cycle is now done, and that would be in the budget year 2021. So we're looking at 2022 budget available in the spring of 2021. And I had a really good experience working with that commission and the input that they took from and time they spent learning about projects. And I know we have things coming up, and I would really encourage the district to be thinking about that as a potential funding partner. What they're really looking for, they got 290 proposals this year, totaling over about $220 million to spend on their 60 plus million that they had. But of the 290, over 150 of them were studies at the University of Minnesota. And there are members that want to do capital projects, boots on the ground, that aren't, things that, not that it isn't important to study the white-nosed bat, it's important. But there are members that really want to do capital projects, and they want to do it with people that bring money to the table. So as you guys go through your planning, I hope you'll continue to consider that as a possible funding partner. So there's my report, and we're going to turn over to Emily and then answer questions that you have.
Madam President, managers, thank you so much for having me here today. I just want to first say thank you so much for the discussion about the summer tour. You really made my day to hear about how that impacted you. It was, I think, as far as impact, probably one of the best tours that I've seen. I just saw so much and heard so much about how people were impacted by seeing what other people were going through and being seen. That I mentioned at the Metro Mod meeting that Jerry Nordic, who had us come to his farm, he called and spent 15, 20 minutes on the phone thanking me just over and over about what it meant that so many people from the Twin Cities came out. And he said, a lot of times they stop at St. Cloud and they never go further. You know, and for us to come out there and to ask such good questions and to understand what they were doing, and it made him feel like we cared from the metropolitan area about what they were doing and understood that they do cool things too. It isn't just all happening here. So thank you for sharing that and how that impacted you, and I'll just continue to take that. And really looking forward to coming here next summer. And I think Jerry will come back and join us for that too also. So that's fun. And just a reminder, of course, Maud does hire a lobbyist. Ray Bone is our official lobbyist. I sometimes think of him as he gets to be the bad guy, and then I get to sometimes be the good guy, or he can do the dirty work, and I can come in and be the smiling face on the stand and when we need to testify. So, but Ray has been excellent. It's been great to work with Joel and learn from him this last couple of years also. One thing I did notice before I was the executive director here, I worked at a soil and water conservation district office for 4 years and was a manager at the Blue Earth Soil and Water Conservation District for 6. Represented Minnesota on the National Board of Conservation Districts. And so what I've seen over those 10 years with my time in soil and water, and then I've got about 6 or 8 years with watershed districts, but the recognition by legislators of local government who manage water seems to just really be at an all-time high, and it's really fantastic to see how much they know what a soil and water conservation district is, what is a watershed, what is a watershed district, and that work is not done yet, but there's just so much more respect and knowledge of what we're doing locally at local government. So that was one of my takeaways this year. I was just so impressed, and they were dedicated to making sure that folks had funding and were able to do the work because they recognize we are the best place to get work done on a local level. In your packets, I did print out or provide you with the legislative platform and the results. That was this sheet is what we had at the legislative briefing that we had in February or March. I think it was February, and with no results yet. And so I took the exact same sheet and then added the results right on there. And we did have a really good year. I don't think any of us going in thought we could have gotten this much completed, but it was, and a lot of it was from the previous year. We'd done a lot of groundwork the year before. We did have to repeat all those steps, but just getting hearings and stuff was easier. And one thing when you mentioned, you get special time with the new water committee that they had in the House. They invited us, they gave us 30 minutes on a committee hearing to just say, what are watershed districts? And so that had never happened before. So whatever we wanted to say, we were able to do that. So we maximized that. One of the things that I know was important to Minnetonka Creek was some of the issues surrounding carp. And when you try to hire a contractor to remove that carp, you only have the one fisherman that's assigned to that lake can do that. And folks here at your office helped us sort that out and have some meetings and attended some meetings with the DNR, and that definitely was pivotal getting that passed. So I appreciate the help and support that your district offered to that. I guess the next thing I would point out is for next year we have, this was the first time we've been able to do this. We've already taken a look at what we want to work on next year, and so I've provided that also. Of course, since Joel mentioned it's a bonding year, we will definitely we'll put a lot of energy into making sure that we get some bonding for flood hazard mitigation. And we will also, the issue of the tax levy limit, that isn't necessarily a huge issue for you, but we may need to ask you to help us with that for the rural areas. You know, they are capped at $250,000 a year. If you can imagine trying to run a district, the one that I was the administrator for last, the Yellow Medicine, was 707 square miles, capped at a general levy of $250,000. It's hard to get a lot done for that, and so We may need some assistance from everyone to tell that story and to see if we can get enough support to increase that. The salt, the commercial salt applicators bill, I will say, I want you to know, I know you have worked on it, so many people have worked on it, and the legislators definitely understood, because of all of our efforts, that salt is a problem, over-application is a problem, and it is linked to liability. Now, how that gets sorted out with the legislature, I don't know that that is our expertise, but we definitely, because of all of us going and telling that story, the issue is clearly understood. So thank you for that too. The two issues that we will be playing defense on will be the House File 1887. We've been referring to that as the Developer Bill of Rights. I know you're familiar with that. We are setting up a meeting to get the different watershed districts together and figure out how we are going to do marketing that is kind of counter the issue that the developer in this behind this House File. The messages that he's sending out, how can all of us send out kind of the issue, or send out the message of who watershed districts really are? And so I'm looking forward to that, and there's been a lot of interest in people wanting to help. So consistent marketing across watershed districts will definitely will help there. And I think, the last thing that I have in your packet, it is that time of year for our organization to, if there are issues that you want the organization to work on, to submit those resolutions. And I do have everything that's on the books right now. So as you're thinking about, would you want Maud to work on something, if it isn't on these last 2 pages, you should be writing a resolution to ask the members to vote on whether or not we should focus energy on topics that go beyond these 2 pages and on the preliminary platform.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Welch.
Emily, I know we spoke about this a couple weeks ago. My experience with the SALT legislation was that it was there, gone.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't know.
What happened to it?
You know, a couple things on that. Number one, I don't know why the Senate wouldn't accept it. It was agreed upon by everyone, and I'm unsure why.
But it was a conference committee problem.
Yeah. And there was no opposition to it.
The tort lawyers were not.
No, we agreed to it, and so I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't just check that box and get it done. There was a fiscal impact to it, and the PCA said we got a clean water grant to do training, and so we don't need to have this fee to make this program happen, and it's voluntary anyway. And I think I talked to Rick Hansen, and he said nobody pushed for it. I was like, we're just not going to do it, but I'm happy to report that I am now a certified salt applicator. I went to the training yesterday at Raleigh Purgatory and sat through my 6 hours of training and got my little badge. I'm a certified salt applicator because it is an important issue.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to know what the training was about and what they were, what it is you're trying to get people to understand, and the little cups that they give out instead of the big jug. I mean, I was glad I went. But I don't know what the hang up is. I don't see it, quite frankly, coming back. I'd be hard pressed to see the Senate take it up after they dumped on it. And Senator Rude, it was her bill, and she was in on the agreement, and the compromise was on the conference committee, and it didn't happen. So I don't know what the issue was there, quite frankly. So.
I can offer that James Lisker and I are on the resolutions committee, and this legislative platform is subject to the resolutions process, so it can change.
Yes.
As resolutions come in, and the legislative committee will look at it again. So this is not yet
Correct.
Finished. Mr. Carlson, thank you so much for the assistance you gave us in setting up meetings over there during the session. That was great.
Happy to do it.
And thank you both. Are there questions? Yes.
I have a question.
For Joel, regarding LCCMR and your recommendation, we'll touch base offline, but I'm just curious if you know the general ratio of funding distributions they made last cycle for bricks and mortar versus studies, because they do tend to be known for funding studies, and I'm just wondering where the appetite for shift is coming from and how that's actually going to manifest in
I
the
think
decisions
that-
they're making moving forward.
I just, I think that the lack of capital projects that they feel are fundable, meaning it doesn't supplant other, right? It's in their path, in their wheelhouse, are not as strong or as plentiful as they could be. The other thing is that just watching it, and I really paid attention, I always watch it, but I mean, I really paid attention this time. I think that there are certain members of the commission that just automatically rank all of the, as an example, all of the university projects really high.
Right.
And if you, the way it works is, if you get a number of members on the commission to rank your projects really high, that's how they make the cutoff line. Of the 290, they heard 126. And if you have 7 members who are ranking every single study very high, you're going to have a lot of the 126 that are going to get heard. And that's what happens. I mean, I watched it. And so, I mean, I really think that some effort with the LCCMR members before they do their scoring and before they put in their list of projects that they want to hear, I think is really important and helpful, because you can just see it happen. Okay, every project that had 7 or above, 7 votes for a hearing, 7 or above out of the 17, we're going to take, or 9 or above, I forget which exact number they used, but a lot of them were studies, and I think that that's just how it happens. So, I mean, I really think you got to do some prep work before they start even hearing, you know, if you're going about it, I'm going to put my project in, I'll see if I get a hearing, I don't think you're going to do very well.
I'm just wondering if there is a tangible shift in policy, or you're just saying that more direct outreach would serve us well if we want to get projects.
I can tell you that among some of the members, there's a tangible shift of, I'm sick of funding these studies, I want to do projects.
Okay, thanks.
As they verbalized it, they said it. And so, yes, I think there is a definite mood among some of the current membership to move a little bit more in a shovel in the ground kind of approach.
Thank you.
Managers, a couple other 3 quick legislative items that are a little bit more mundane, but that Joel and or Emily may have some insights on, and one in particular that I think the district might want to keep its eyes on if it comes up again. First was with regard to the open meeting law. If any of you are thinking of joining the military and getting deployed somewhere off-site, you can still participate in a meeting by video conference. That, for all of the hullabaloo about making meeting attendance more flexible via things like Skype, that was a very, very narrow addition that they made to the open meeting law, and it will apply to very, very few members of any boards in the state, maybe some city councils. I don't know if that's going to come back. Joel might be watching some of that. We've communicated with staff especially in planning and projects, about a fairly significant change in the retainage law for projects and construction projects that I think is mostly going to be just working with the engineers and drafting contract specifications, but they've really tightened up the amount of time that the public agencies can hold on to money to ensure contractor performance. Details are probably going to make everybody glaze over, but suffice to say that we're That goes into effect next week for all contracts the district enters after August 1st. So we'll be working with the engineering staff and planning staffs to ensure that those changes are get made. Finally, there was a very interesting bit of legislation that did go forward for cities and I believe counties and townships as well, where when developers apply for permits, they now have the right to demand a written estimate from of what the consulting fees will be that the cities will incur in reviewing those permit applications. And watershed districts, to my knowledge, were never in the mix on that bill. It affects the 1599 timeline, the deadline for taking action on applications. It feels like much ado about nothing to me, but it signals some sympathy for the developer point of view of we're just getting pounded on these fees from consultants. Do you see that going any further?
Well, and the pounding is, and after the fact, I had this project reviewed and I got a $28,000 bill.
That I had to pay to get my permit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it is more, I don't think it's so much the fee themselves, which you can always quibble over, quibble maybe isn't the right word, have a dispute over. But letting you know in advance that this is what it might cost or an estimate of what it might cost, I think there was a sympathetic ear to hearing that. Like, yeah, I guess I should know if you're gonna spend, 40 hours of staff time reviewing my, 5-house subdivision and I gotta pay an extra 10 grand for it, I should know that now. Because I might not do it, or I might not do it until I pre-sold some, or I might not do it, the review a little bit later in the process. So I think there was some sympathy to the development community that we should have some idea of what the cost may be.
Now, whether that makes developers come in the way that the district and others have always encouraged people to come in very, very early to review what the regulatory requirements are so they can build that into their design, I don't know if it'll have that much positive impact, but that would be the positive way to spin that one.
And I appreciate you, Michael, putting that on the radar because the drumbeat has started already on affordable housing for next session, which is, we can't build a house for under $290,000 because of all the fees and permits that we have to apply for and pay for, and all of the local government-driven requirements for these projects. And so you can hear the home building community thinking there's maybe some sympathy there. I went through this 2 sessions ago. And they said, if you just change these condo regulations, we're going to build condos like crazy in Minneapolis. The market's there. And every single building that's gone up since they got the law changed has been an apartment. It's been an apartment. And they promise single, individual ownership units, and that has not happened.
Oh.
So their track record of crying cost and it will get a different outcome is not very good, at least from what I've been watching. So. An apartment's going up in downtown Minneapolis. Like every other sidewalk is blocked off with a boom crane when they're putting up something. It's really taken off. They anticipate 70,000 people living downtown between now and like 2035.
Which it would be about double, right?
Yeah, it's like 35,000 now, something like that.
Oh, is that right?
I think so, yeah. It's a lot. So, thank you.
It's not going to happen because of the restrictions that that they're talking about putting on. Most of the major developers that have been doing the apartments already announced to the city they weren't going to build anymore.
On the background screening requirements or?
The background requirements, because they got trouble getting financing with those kinds of things in there. And the set aside for on-site for assisted housing. And there was a third one. But, the major developers have already sent letters saying, count us out.
If you do this,
Don't call us for any social events you might have either.
I get there infrequently, but the Minneapolis City Council is, it's got a different mindset right now. That's for sure.
Didn't the condo thing kind of dry up because of the liability for condos?
Well, that was the push to change the law,
warranties,
and then they
yeah.
changed the law, and then no change in building practice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the whole push, was,
Yeah.
we gotta change this, we want a shorter warranty period, and they changed it. But it didn't change the building practice.
Anything else for our guests? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Did you want to ask your question? Ask a question.
We're excused?
No, I do have one quick follow-up.
Sure.
And you might need it too. We had a discussion about when laws take effect in Minnesota.
Yes.
And so, one of the things that did pass was the per diem situation,
Yes.
managers. So when is that?
That did go into effect July 1st, and I did get that information directly from the revisor's office. Usually a policy bill does go into effect August 1st, and it was a policy issue, but it was put into the budget bill, and the budget bills start with the new fiscal year, July 1st. So anything in the budget bill starts July 1st. Yeah, the appropriations, yes, the appropriations bill. So the per diem, but you will have to you want to check and make sure your bylaws allow a per diem increase. Of course, by your attorney, make sure that you're okay, but that law did go into effect July 1st.
I agree.
So it's
Well
still,
reasoned, counsel. Nicely done.
but it would still be something we would have to vote on.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Unless, if your bylaws said that you are to be paid the maximum amount allowed by statute, otherwise you would have to change it. But I think most bylaws usually say $75 per day or whatever you've set it at.
I don't remember.
But you
what
can
the
go up
bylaws
to
say about per
125.
diem.
I don't think they do. Because the last time we increased it, we voted on it.
Yeah, it's in our governance policies. I know that. So we should visit that in the
Yes.
near future date.
Great, thank you. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
It's handy to set it at whatever the legislature sets it at, and then when it changes, gotta go back and do it. It's a good tip. All right,
Thank you very much.
I'm glad she could straighten that out for you.
We'll go to item 11.1. Ms. Reynolds, resolution 19070.
Thank you, President White, managers. This evening, we have in front of you the selection and authorization to enter into a contract with an accountant for the district. We have completed the RFP. I'm sorry, I'm sitting too far away here. We've completed the RFP process. We'll kind of go through this. So I'll walk you through the purpose, the timeline, kind of the budget that we've looked at, scope of services, what we've worked through, and the cost comparisons of the vendors. So back in November, in the process of reviewing the audit contracts or the audit proposals, the board made the decision to direct staff to do the accounting RFP with the goal of separating the provisions of the accounting services and our audit services. So historically, we've had everything provided by Redpath and Company, and you asked us to look into separating those two services. So in June, you authorized the release of the RFP for accounting services. We've got proposals in, and we've reviewed those, and so tonight we're back with those results and asking you to approve the selection and authorization to contract. So our current budget for accounting and audit work is $85,000. To date, we've spent $53,000 of that. 27 of that was on our audit for 2018's audit, and to date, or through June, we've spent $26,000 on accounting services this year. We estimate the new contract with the recommended vendor at $27,650. That would be for 5 months of service, so August through December plus transition costs. So the scope of services, as we set out in the RFP for the accounting contract, we looked at monthly and quarterly reporting. So as you look at this screen, you see the red highlights. Those are the new services or the new things that we'll be kind of expanding and including with the contract. So monthly and quarterly reporting, it includes grant reporting, because through this new contract, what we want to do is implement grant accounting and reporting, and we also want to implement using the accounts receivable module and doing a better job of tracking the invoices that are going out from the district so we can actually have accountability of invoices being paid and the money coming in. So we're looking at that. Both of those will help alleviate staff time and take with the grant accounting will help remove that extra piece from our project planners, allowing them more time to work with projects. And then when it comes time to filing those final reports and those year-end reports on their grants, the accountant can assist them and provide them with the grant information and the grant accounting piece. So they don't have to try and do all that accounting on their own. So you can see those kind of the red highlights throughout. So we're looking at monthly and quarterly reporting services, general accounting services, so our accounts payable, accounts receivable, grant accounting. The annual reporting requirements that the accountants help us with. Audit preparation, you'll see there we have the work papers highlighted in red. That's because what we're really doing is moving all of the audit work papers onto the accountant. Right now, our auditors have been preparing a subset of our work papers, so they come in, conduct kind of their initial audit, then they conduct and they create the work papers that the accountant should be providing to them, and then they, in essence, re-audit it. So what we're doing is we're taking those work papers and moving them over to the accountant and having the accountant actually prepare them, and then the auditor will audit them. This year, we started that transition with staff really trying to create and accomplish some of those work papers, but the auditor still had to come in and help because we don't have an accountant on staff and trying to work some of those things we needed help with still. The assist with the budget preparations, this is really just helping staff pull trend analysis and fund summaries. So when we look at the policy and the direction that's set by the board, they can take that policy and direction and look at some of these trend analysis and apply where they want to go. Right now, if staff wants to look at any of that stuff, they're looking at trying spreadsheets that they've kept on their own. So really getting the accountant involved with that and providing that information that staff needs to really set with the policy that the board is setting. Then kind of the other accounting services is a little bit of a catch-all, providing general oversight of the accounting work that's being done. So really looking to the accountant to show and to provide a separation of responsibilities instead of having a single person accomplishing everything on the accounting side. And then implement the accounts receivable and grant accounting, and then keep us informed on new accounting standards and changes and so forth that we need to be making within the district. So that's kind of the scope of services as was set out in the RFP and what we're looking for the accountant to do moving forward. So for proposals, we received 4 proposals, Clifton Larson Allen, Abdo Eichenmeyers, Schellner Wenner and Company, and Carlson Espy. Staff reviewed all 4 of those, and we brought in all 4 of them for interviews and kind of discussion about their approach to the accounting service and the services they would be providing, and just to get a feel for the organization and the firm that would be doing the work. Based off of those, we did eliminate one of those 3 and didn't really it was an easy elimination for us to move forward with our analysis. And we contacted references for the other 3 to see what the references said in regards to those firms and the work that they were providing with them. We kind of used all of that, and we said the criteria set in our proposal was the independence of the firm, which all of them had the independence, the background and experience, their approach to the accounting service, and then their cost. Experience-wise, Clifton, Larson, and Allen they do some work, but a lot of their work is with nonprofits when they're doing monthly accounting services. Abdo Eichenmeyers has both government and nonprofit work. Schellner Wenner and Company does not have a lot of background, and all of their references that they provided us were on the audit side. So it was really hard to get an experience for what they do on the monthly accounting side. When we get to cost, wanted to provide you kind of a cost comparison of where we're looking at. So looking back through 2015 through 2019, what has been the average monthly rate? With RedPath, we have a standard monthly rate that we pay, but then everything above basically a very general monthly accounting work is charged out at an additional fee. So when you look at it, the actuality of our average monthly rate has varied from just under $5,000 to almost $6,800. When we kind of look at adding in the audit work, the work papers that the auditors have been doing for us that would be pulling over to the accounting side, you can kind of see where the numbers jump from almost $5,500 a month to upwards to $7,300 a month is what we're paying right now on average to RedPath. So when we look at the vendors as they came in, you can see the rates that they proposed in their proposals. And the staff's recommendation is Abdo Eichenmeyer's, which is AEM on there. So they're kind of they're not the most expensive, they're not at the top, they're also not at the bottom of the amounts. Schellner, you'll see the two different numbers, and that is because they propose a base monthly rate of the $2,700, but then they propose, as kind of with RedPath, everything else is done at an hourly rate basis, and they estimated that out for what those costs would be. And so separating that out, so that's what you get there. Staff's decision to recommend AEM is really on their approach to the accounting services and their references. Their references, as we called them, we had the unsolicited, without even the question mark, is they're amazing, they're great to work with. We love having them as our accountants. That's what we get from there. CLA, their references, I got they're doing okay. They do an okay job for us. So it was really kind of a mediocre reference point on theirs. And then, as I said, Schellner was really on the audit side. The other real difference that stood out is Schellner is really providing bookkeeping services, which is where I would say RedPath is at right at the moment, where they really are just doing the data entry and the basic accounting and not really doing any of the analysis of the numbers or any of the critical double checks. And it's all being done by an individual person just putting it in with nobody reviewing that or double checking on that. CLA, through their proposal, indicates a team approach where they would be separating it out, but in conversation with their references, that was one of the things that they said the team was there for the first month or two through transition, and then it's gone. So AEM proposes out kind of that in-depth, providing separation of responsibilities, multiple people who know your accounts that can help out and assist if somebody's on vacation, and be there and be available to you. So staff, based on the overarching, staff recommends going with Abdo Eichenmeyer's as the district accountant and moving forward with that direction. So, so in summary, we recommend Abdo Eichenmeyer's, and then we would ask that the board authorize the district administrator to execute a contract with them for amounts, for the scope of services as we've set out, for amounts not to exceed those that are out there, which it matches what is in their proposal.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 19070?
So moved.
Manager Rodman, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Maxwell. Are there questions? Manager Olson?
Okay, this is a 3-year obligation or contract?
It'd be 2 years. We are obligated to go out every 2 years, but 2 years does put us into 2021, so we do have 2021 numbers in there.
Okay, and the initial invoice that they call the one that's going to be sent out in 10 days, that's the $1,800?
That is their standard contract, and we would be we'll negotiate out probably with our standard contract, so I'm not sure why they would, what it all would be entailed in that initial invoice within 10 days in their mindset. I have not gone back and questioned them on that one because I know through our council, they prefer to not use that contract and modify that contract, but to use our standard contract and then make any modifications that we need to our contract, so.
What if we want more services? What if we need something in a surge or something to that effect? Is there a way they can invoice more than their monthly amount?
Yes, they do have in there, an hourly rate that they charge for their hourly services. And so if we do need something that they say is outside of the scope, I mean, they agree that within that, they're willing to do certain amount of work, answer questions and so forth. But if it's going to be a larger project and it's going to take more, then there would be advance notification of this would be an excess charge and an estimate of what it is, so we can know moving forward whether we go with that route or not.
Yeah, they showed those different breakdowns.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Reynolds? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move to the administrator's report. Mr. Whisker.
Before we begin with
Yes,
that,
Manager.
the administrator's report, I got three things that I want to bring up on the next planning agenda, planning committee agenda. Not necessarily the next one, but be queued up. And I want this on the record because I've asked for it many times over the years, and nothing gets done because there's higher priorities. I recognize that, but the status of the Granville neighborhood regarding whether it's in our district or in 9 Mile, I think is important to get that decided, because there's a $40 million addition to the Our Lady of Grace campus that's being planned, and we got to decide where that water is going, because right now it's mostly open space. And the second thing is that I would like an analysis of opportunities for bridgehead purchases. I've said many times that most people consume the environment through their windshield, and crossing bridges on Minnetonka Creek is an opportunity to do that when there's vacant land and we can prevent some development. So I'd like to have that. And a few years ago, we had a very extensive report on wetlands inventory and conditions and quality, and I'd like to have a discussion on that, whether we should update that, and what role their condition is going to play in future storage of stormwater that we're seeing it being a constant issue, and whether these ponds and wetlands are being cared for in such a way that they're an asset rather than liability. So I'll leave it up to the administrator to figure out when he wants to bring that to the committee, but I want it in the next 6 months or so, if we can discuss those issues at the Planning and Policy Committee meeting, and not have it subject to a phone call that doesn't get it addressed.
We can work on agendas. Thank you. Mr. Whisker?
Very good. Thank you, Manager Miller.
Thank you.
President White, managers, a couple of things to tick through. Number one, we've been getting feedback from the community at large, I'd say, with regards to progress on Arden Park on sort of both sides of the equation. On social media, there's been some activity on Twitter from one or two residents that's gone out to county board, legislators, city council that aren't that pleased with the work. Staff, as usual, done a good job reaching out to that particular individual. They're engaged through the early parts of planning and design, and there wasn't really any interest in connecting with the Watershed District to learn more. We've also coordinated with legislators, county and city, just to make sure that everybody has the information they need. So not much more to report on that. On the other side of the coin, there have been kudos for the work both in St. Louis Park that's been completed to date and Arden Park from a number of different residents that have been paddling the creek, and we had some compliments from residents that are using Arden Park that were sent out to both staff as well as city staff, noting how well the project's turning out and support for the work. So just some feedback from the community there. Moving west, the Wasserman Park, the proposals for park design, as you recall, the board authorized a request for proposals. It's a highly competitive pool. I think somewhat unusual, but we received 12 proposals for design from LA firms. Anna put quite a bit of energy just into networking with landscape architecture, civil firms around the metro. But I think the work on Cottageville, Arden to kind of help promote that work. So staff's narrowing down that pool to around 3, and they'll be conducting interviews within the next week and a half. And then recommendations for selection will be in front of the board in August to get started on that. So very competitive, a lot of interest, and gives us some options to work with, which is very nice. I'm going to talk briefly about the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District's Technical Advisory Group that they have formed for the Lake Minnetonka Vegetation and AIS Master Plan that they're undertaking. They had their first meeting in July, and it was really focused. I attended the meeting, and it was focused largely on the threat of introduction of starry stonewort, which has been found and is propagated in Medicine Lake. And there's a lot of boat traffic between Medicine and Minnetonka, so there's concern around that being an emerging threat, as well as evaluation of the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District's milfoil harvesting program. So that was the first agenda. It wasn't entirely clear really what the focus or priorities of the planning process is writ large, and that was a lot of the feedback that the advisory group gave. And like I said, we've attended, provided written feedback, myself, Brian, and now Tom will be continuing to track that and attend the meetings as they come up, with the next one, I think, being tentatively targeted for sometime in August. So we'll keep you posted as that situation matures. President White and I met with the executive team and the Citizens Advisory Committee, I think that was still this week, who had reached out and expressed some interest in just remaining connected and meeting on a quarterly basis with myself and President White. Our first meeting, we just talked about the trajectory of CAC over the last year and a half and how they felt things were going, current status, what they were looking for in terms of goals for these quarterly meetings, and then we discussed future priorities for CAC just to kind of think through in the upcoming quarter and into next year what some of the priorities might be. Generally, in terms of trajectory and status, the feedback that we got is there's been a significant amount of improvement. The executive team from CAC said everybody's feeling much more engaged. They're feeling that the feedback's being taken, that they're much more in sync. They understand what the priorities are, and they feel useful to both the board and the organization. So a good positive report card on that. In terms of goals for the meeting, like I said, they're really just looking to stay in sync with the board priorities and keep the good thing that they have going in the future, and make sure that they're really serving the board and the priorities that the board's setting for the organization. And so in terms of future priorities, we talked about just the work around communications, the diverse background of the CAC, really plugging in to help workshop tactics, strategies, as well as the audience assessment, test the website, that sort of thing. We'd also talked about getting back in front of them some of the information that the board discussed at its annual retreat this year regarding vis-a-vis climate adaptation and interim steps that we might take to ready ourselves for planning work in the future. And then the last area that's in the strategic action plan is just how this organization across its programs is measuring success and reporting on it. So as we design a new permitting program, or we're outlining goals for strategic communications, or we're designing and building projects, what are our measures of success and how are we reporting on that? And we think that that's something that the CAC could really sink its teeth into and workshop before consuming time with the board on measurements of outputs and reporting. So it's a little bit of a summary of the discussion with the CAC. And President White, since you were there, I don't know if you have anything to add.
We also talked about the size of the CAC and how it's really manageable at the current 15 members. It's not too big, it's not too small, and they were very happy with the size. Good participation. They have been having quorums, and with that number of people, everyone really can weigh in. It's not too big.
Right, yeah. And then the last note, and this was already mentioned during committee, but not everybody was able to join us, is Sarah Bomani, the Watershed District's communications coordinator. Her last day with the district's going to be August 20th. She's accepted a position with the Humane Society, so we want to wish her well, thank her for her contribution to the district, and of course, Telly and I are already beginning to sit down with her and work on transition planning. So wish her well, and if there's questions or concerns about that transition, I know you'll all let me know.
I got one other comment, if I could.
Yes.
I want to ask the council if he thinks that we've got a potential suit with the Vastus Creek Watershed District because of transmission of these invasive species into our district.
Yeah.
So maybe you could wear several hats.
Real good case, probably.
Are you still on the board there?
I am.
Are you? Okay. All right.
Getting close to being the longest serving member ever.
Everyone here has
But-
multiple hats, I think. We all belong to.
I'm in a position to just make a cash payment tonight.
All right.
It's easier than arguing with yourself.
Oh, you can't know
Yeah,
billable
don't put
hours.
it past me. I spend a lot of time on that.
And Bassett Creek's a member of LUNC now, right?
They are, yeah, it is.
Anything else? We are adjourned.